And we're back. I'm Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
There is a strong wave of technology infiltrating the sales role, both in being efficient in our daily behavior and by the prospect in limiting the interaction with a salesperson. This direction will not go away. However, we can use technology to improve and increase our results and overall success in our role of selling. Bill and I know better than to go it alone on this topic, so we've asked expert guest Kitty Hart to join us to discuss technology, friend or foe, and much more on episode 450 of Get in the Door podcast.
Well, we are coming back to our book club, Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, and we are on chapter 7, Acquiring the Habit of Happiness. And can we make ourselves happy, Scott? That's what he seems to be implying.
It's a choice. I think happiness is a choice. I first learned about studying happiness from the book by Dennis Prager, Happiness is a Serious Problem. Some of our listeners have heard about that. It's a great book. And it's an obligation. We have an obligation to be happy. If we're interacting with other people, we have an obligation to be pleasant and happy. And that's one of the things that this chapter talks about is some people think that if we decide to be happy, we're being selfish.
And I think there's been a number of research or a lot of research done on people from a medical standpoint. If they're positive, if they're happy, they seem to heal better. We seem to enjoy our lives more. Even way back, King Solomon said, "A merry heart doeth good like medicine, but a broken spirit drieth up the bones." I don't want dried bones.
Wow. No, that's a word we haven't used very often. Drieth.
Drieth. Yeah. I think he must have gotten this from the King James Version.
Happiness is a state of mind in which our thinking is pleasant a good share of the time. And that's out of the book. It doesn't mean that everything is perfect. And I think there's a real difference between being happy and being joyful.
Yeah.
And joyful is being able to be optimistic and be able to take the bad with the good. And optimism, I think I've shared this before, has two definitions. One is being hopeful before a decision is made. And the second is dwelling on the most positive aspects after a decision is made. And both sides really contribute to our happiness.
Well, I think that was what he said that was so important, was that bad things are going to happen. That doesn't mean that tragedy will not strike us, but how we respond to that tragedy is the most important. I love Abraham Lincoln's quote. He didn't have this in the book. He had this in the book. Most folks are as happy as they make up their mind to be. And Mr. T's quote, I think, is just as important, was, "I may have been raised in the ghetto, but there ain't no ghetto in me."
Yeah.
And, it's a choice. Life is a choice on whether we want to be happy. And sometimes I find myself making the wrong choice early in the morning. I get up and I almost decide to be grumpy that day. Right. And we can decide to be grumpy or we can decide to be happy. It really is the decision that we want to make.
It's almost like we start with an angst. And I guess that's probably the term getting up on the wrong side of the bed comes from. One of the things that I was really interested in the book is that he said it's that which comes first, happiness or success. And if we wait until you deserve to think pleasant thoughts, you will likely think unpleasant thoughts concerning your own unworthiness. So happiness is not a reward for virtue. And we have to think about if I'm successful, I'll be happy. And I'm not going to be happy until I'm successful. Well, that's not going to get you there.
Right.
We have to decide to be happy now and find joy and happiness in everything that happens today and not get distracted with the bad stuff.
Well, and who wants to talk to a salesperson that is grumpy? Has a bad attitude, is talking negatively about their product or themselves or the day or the company or the competition or whatever. All those things reflect back on us as salespeople. And so what our attitude is like, whether we're happy and optimistic and forward looking, all those things make a difference in whether we can close the deal.
And that gets into a choice of what are we going to focus on too. And sometimes it's better to talk to a depressed salesperson than an overly enthusiastic salesperson.
Well,
those overly enthusiastic salesperson, I just wanted, I don't want
to. Yeah. I have a friend who's just so positive that sometimes it's hard to take. But I do know that in people I've talked to, a 7 or an 8 on that enthusiasm scale is pretty good. A 10 is like, it's banging the needle up against the too much side. But But a 7 or an 8, you have to be positive. You have to be realistic, but positive. And like you say, you know bad things can happen, but how do I respond to those things? And one of the things he talks about is that, these unhappy behaviors, beliefs, these are learned habits. And we have to form new habits by making a conscious decision. And you and I have talked about this over and over as we talked about these books, intentionality. You have to go out and when you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, you have to say, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm going to feel happy. I'm going to smile. Dale Carnegie in his book says, start by smiling and then see what happens. So it's the actions start first, and then those beliefs and those habits start to follow.
Right. He says in the book that happiness is a mental habit, a mental attitude, and if it is not learned in practice in the present, it is never experienced. We really live in 3 time zones. We live in the past with regret. We live in the future with anxiety. We have to live in the now and find the happiness now.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier about intention and how we interpret things. One of the things that I've really found fascinating was when he talked about the person that lost $200,000. Remember that part?
That'll depress guy.
Yeah. Well, back in the time, that was probably $1 million back in whenever the book was
60s,
written.
Yep.
But we concentrate on the opinion of what happened. We add judgment to what happened, and we have that choice. When I was selling real estate, I always say to a buyer when we go into a house, now let's go into the house and let's look around. Let's look at the house. And if you can suspend judgment on whether you like it or don't like it, but just look at the facts of the house, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to be able to make a decision on whether this one is the one or not, because we keep giving ourselves judgments on stuff that happens versus suspending judgment and just going by the facts and the reality of it.
Interesting. Yeah, I like to talk about, are you a thermometer or a thermostat?
Mm-hmm.
Are you the one that's controlling the atmosphere in the room like a thermostat, or are you just reflecting the situation around you and you're nothing but a thermometer? And so I think that's really good to think about. We can be the thermostat in any situation. We can add happiness to a situation. We can add positivity to a situation. We can help other people see what good can come of this. And we talked last time about worry and putting those worries away, and many of them wouldn't happen, right? Or they didn't come to pass. And it's the same with happiness. Sometimes if we can change the atmosphere, we can control the future because we're changing that atmosphere, kind of like a thermostat warms your house.
Mm-hmm. You saw the part about the dis-ease.
Yes.
I thought that was pretty interesting on how he broke that word into two words, dis-ease.
Yep.
I saw that once in a book, and they had the word recreate, which is recreation is to recreate ourselves.
Yeah.
And we need to have that balance, and we need to go on vacation. We need to get away from it all.
All right, good. Choose to be happy, right?
Exactly. It's a choice. This segment of Get in the Door podcast is brought to you by The Art of Prospecting, your guide to getting in the door, by Steve Kloida.
Steve Kloida was known internationally for increasing salespeople's ability to make solid appointments with qualified prospects. You too can learn this essential skill by ordering a copy of his superb book, The Art of Prospecting, your guide to getting in the door. In this book, Steve shares the top strategies and tactics he has developed, implemented, and personally tested with more than 1 million sales and prospecting calls. You can get his book on the website, theprospectingexpert.com. In addition, check out his other great online resources. Instant Sales Coaching, which will guide you through 5 online success modules. A guided prospecting process entitled Call Reluctance Transformer, and the Magnetic Selling Strategies Workbook, a detailed step-by-step guide to increasing your sales. Get any of these valuable resources at theprospectingexpert.com.
So we all have an opinion on technology. We have voicemail, sales automation, AI, CRMs, and those call tracking reports that salespeople love. How can all technology be our friend? We invited Kitty Hart to join us today. Kitty, for the people that don't know you, what would you like them to know?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Well, it's nice to have you.
Yeah, it's been fun getting to know you guys and preparing for today. What do I want people to know? Well, here's an interesting little tidbit. As I've now been in a sales role for over 25 years of my career, if you had asked me 30-ish years ago when I graduated from Gustavus that I would make a living in sales, I would have seriously questioned you because it was not in my vision whatsoever. And so the fact that I am here having this conversation with you guys today about sales is really puzzling to me, but also I'm excited.
I don't think you're alone in that. I think a lot of people come into sales, I don't want to say by accident, but as a result of situations, and that wasn't their plan, but they sure enjoy it once they're here.
Yeah. And I think maybe for a lot of those people, well, I can speak for myself in this. It wasn't my plan because I didn't have a very positive impression of it. So just real quick on the evolution toward what I'm doing today, the sales roles that I've had in the past, I worked for a really great design firm for 10 years. And the work that we did there was all about creating beautiful logos and visual language. And so in the end, what we were doing was bringing brands and people together through the fundamentals of visual language. I left there and I went to an experiential agency where now it was all about bringing brands and people together through the physical environment. And here at Dynamico, what we do is all about bringing brands and people together through the effective use of technology. So that's the common thread through my career in sales. And I think in the world that we live in right now, technology has never been more important. So I'm thrilled to be sitting in this seat right now.
Well, I like that thread that you bring up, Kitty, because it's so important. Bringing people together is really often what salespeople do. And I think the reason we don't have a good impression of it is that's not how people understand it. I just bought a car, and the young man that took us through the process was really good. And he didn't push us into it, but he guided us. And that's really what sales is guiding people to make a good decision.
Yes.
So Kitty, thanks for joining us. And in my past in finding technology with prospects and salespeople, it's really a relevant topic today. I think sales automation seems to be really popular. And I always believe that, are we making it easier, or are we adding credibility, or how are we shortening the sales cycle, and how are we generating leads? And technology is very important. But like I said in the last episode, does digital marketing add credibility or familiarity? And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But let's start with, is technology our friend, or is it our enemy when it comes to working with prospects and salespeople interacting together? What is your position on that?
Well, in general, just the big broad question, is it our friend or our enemy? I think it's both. I think it's interesting to think about how technology has evolved. And in the world that we live in today, buyer behavior has changed. And so that's why we're leveraging technology so much. But isn't it interesting to think back to the 1920s when radio was invented, and that was the beginning of technology changing people, changing behaviors. So with radio and with TV, and all of a sudden people were like, okay, well, I don't want all of these marketing messages being thrown at me. And so then now in the world that we live in today, people are streaming their content so that they don't have to take in those messages. Right. So technology has been the catalyst of this change. But now if we use technology appropriately, and if we use it in really smart, strategic ways, it can be the solution. But that's the key. We have to think about what we're doing. There are data privacy issues and all of these things. In the end, we want to make the sales process more pleasing to people. So there are right ways to do that. I believe it is our friend. I believe it is absolutely our friend. And I may be one of the minority that says, I don't care if people are collecting data on me, because they're doing that so that they know more about me, so that they put more relevant things in front of me. I know that there are a lot of people who don't feel that way.
Mm-hmm. So friend or enemy, it's always a disruptor, isn't it?
Yes.
It's always going to cause us to change what we do. And if we get too far behind, then it's going to feel more and more like our enemy. And I think that's really one of the challenge for all people, is that we tend to not like to change too much. I mean, there's that 5% out there that loves change, but most of us are a little bit more of a laggard. So when a new disruptive technology comes around, we have to get used to it. We have to become comfortable with it.
I think about when the remote control first came out for a TV. Advertisers didn't like it at all because now people can just sit in their chair and change the channel, versus if we didn't have the remote control, we'd have to, I'm not going to get up. I'll just watch the commercial.
And no. I was the youngest, Scott. I was the youngest in the family. I was the remote control for many years. Billy, get up and change it. Yeah, so then the advertising had to be better. So people wanted to watch the advertising. I think about terrestrial radio and the overwhelming amount of commercials that they put on the terrestrial radio. And then all of a sudden Sirius XM comes out and people subscribe to that. And then all of a sudden terrestrial radio loses listeners because of the advertising. So they ended up doing it to themselves in a way and changing the behavior of the customer, and the customer ended up going someplace else. And now we see that with TV, with digital streaming shows and movies, and now we can get the news without the commercials. Right. It's just a reality that it's going to change, and the advertisers or whoever's paying for it, or however it's being paid for, that has to find a way to change too. So as salespeople, we have to find a way to embrace this change somehow, don't we?
Absolutely. And one of you a little bit earlier said that it can be our enemy when it is, yes, it's seen as overwhelming change. And I think one of the things that holds people back from exploring it and bringing it into their organization is that they just don't know that much about it. But the reality is, why would they? That's why there are experts in the field that you would have come in and have the conversation about it. Then it's not so overwhelming. But yeah, it's just like anything that's new. We need to stay current. We need to stay relevant. And so there's going to be some education to that, and bring the experts in to help you bring this in, because it is the reality of competition today.
I think the experts have to make sure that they understand the value proposition, not just to the people who bought it, but to the people who have to use it. Yes. I had a friend of the show, Steve Keating, who, when he was with a company and one of the big CRMs was coming in 20 years ago, they got it before the sales team and said, you're going to use this CRM because it's going to give great information to the sales managers. And Steve stood up and said, why should the salespeople use it? Well, it's going to give great information to the sales manager. And he said, why should the salespeople want to use it? He goes, well, we really need to generate these reports. And he said, why should the salespeople use it? And they never had an answer for the salespeople, and it made it very hard for them to integrate it. And I think that's really important, that each user, each stakeholder has to find a way to make this of value to them.
Yep. And that is such a missed opportunity for an organization when they don't look at it from the salesperson's perspective. Because, so I'm guessing in that case, that was probably a failed implementation. That was probably a situation where the salespeople had no say in what the tool was that was brought in. And then it probably wasn't customized and set up appropriately for them. And they probably didn't adopt it. They probably didn't use it.
Right.
So people have to want to be in there using it. And you can completely turn that whole situation upside down by saying, okay, Mr. and Ms. Salesperson, we are providing a tool that's going to help you be more successful. Yes, absolutely. The leadership team is going to be looking at metrics, but this is going to help you meet your goals. And when you turn that perspective around, it can make all the difference.
Yeah, it's really important, I think, when it comes to managing the sales process and making it easier for salespeople to create more conversations and manage those conversations that they create. I always say our goal as a salesperson is to create opportunities and leverage the opportunities that we create. And a CRM can definitely assist in doing that and make it easier for us to maintain more than one conversation. I mean, I think about how many conversations can I keep in my head? Probably about 2. And salespeople are probably managing anywhere between 100 and 300 conversations, leads that are coming in, where they have to be personalized for the reasons why somebody's going to buy. And if the salesperson doesn't know why they're going to buy, and the salesperson assumes that they're going to buy for the salesperson's reasons, they're going to hit a dead end, and they're going to get a dead lead, and they're going to get somebody that's never ever going to return a phone call. And those salespeople end up plugging up their pipeline with unqualified leads because they think they have something and they really don't. And the goal, I think, is to really create credibility and create that resource mentality that a prospect wants to talk to a salesperson, because that salesperson knows more about it and is guiding them through the process. Like, Bill, when you bought the car, I mean, you work with a salesperson that is really guiding you through the entire process and not standing in the way. And too often salespeople stand in the way.
So, Bill, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
So in that, you just bought a car. What sort of work did you do in advance of actually sitting down with a salesperson and making the transaction?
I looked at a number of the different cars that were in the size and style that I wanted. So I wanted a mid-size sedan. So I looked at, the Camry and the Accord and the Sonata and kind of limited it to those, got an idea of what the price was going to be. So I knew what features I wanted. I knew what the pricing I wanted. So I had pretty much narrowed it down, and then I was going to go look and see what was out in the marketplace.
So what you just described is one of the main things that has changed in buyer behavior. And again, it's because of the technology. So with all of this information, all of the resources that we have available to us as consumers, the buyer's journey has changed radically. And so technology helps us because as people are doing their research, as you're looking at all of the options that are out there, you're leaving some crumbs. You've got interaction happening. And those of us that are leading marketing and leading sales, if we're leveraging technology in the right way, we can nurture you along the process so that when you are ready to buy, you come to us. You come to the dealership or whatever, right, where you might have had some interaction. And that's really key. And we talk about this a lot at Dynamico. This is everything kind of distills down to this. The way people buy today has changed. And you just demonstrated it, Bill, in the journey that you took toward that car. So the way that we sell has to change. And the technology allows us to do that.
We talked a little bit earlier about salespeople and starting to try and embrace this technology. Do you find it generational at all? Are the older people tend to not like it and the younger people adapt better, or is it more of the attitude?
A little bit, but we're really finding that, the companies that we're talking to, the companies that we're working with, they've been able to see great results from companies who leverage technology. And so like anything else, it's just a matter of showing some really good, tangible case studies for more experienced, that's what I say, rather than older, more experienced leaders to say, yeah, I get it. This is necessary change that we need to bring into our organization. And I think one of the things that makes it easier for companies to get their arms around is that it is not something that you have to just dive right into the deep end on. It's absolutely something that you can start small with and grow with it as you start to see the results and you optimize. So people are very receptive to that. I think maybe more of the resistance that we see is with smaller companies.
Is that kind of a pricing issue for them?
It's perception around pricing. They see it as being very expensive. And the reality is that, there are a lot of really good platforms out there and tools, and many of them offer free trials. Many of them offer free tools when you're just using on the smaller side. So it allows them an opportunity to see how it works and get some value from it, and then grow into the paid tools.
And most cloud companies are able to scale anyway, right? So I'm not paying the same as an organization that might have 50 salespeople.
That's right. Yep.
Katie, we talked a little bit earlier about, I brought it up, digital marketing. And this is one of the areas that I think gets to be a little cloudy when it comes to adding credibility and making it easier. But is it really making it easier for leads to come in? Does it make it easier for the buyers to buy? Does it make it easier for the sellers to sell? How do you maybe describe the difference between familiarity, which I think digital marketing creates, versus credibility, which is what a conversation with a salesperson is about? Because sometimes that buyer's journey that they go down, they're being misled, there's misconceptions. So how do you see salespeople working with digital marketing to work together with familiarity and credibility, or versus, or how do we do that?
Well, this is why sales and marketing alignment is so important. And I think, historically we've seen sales being its own department and marketing being its own department, and they haven't always been best friends. So it's important. And, one of the strategies that we talk about often is you need to break down the silos that exist between these two departments. And when those two departments work together, then they're working in concert in truly understanding the buyer persona. Have those two entities together define the buyer's personas. There's no question about what the potential buyer is looking for, what they need, what their triggers are, what their goals and objectives are. And when you do that, then any sort of marketing that's happening should be speaking the same language. It's marketing's job to nurture, to create that awareness, educate, keep people engaged until they raise their hand and they're now ready to talk to a salesperson. And thanks to the technology, the salesperson has access to all of that activity that's happened.
I think that's one of the biggest gaps that I've seen for the non-technology salesperson is that customer, that potential client that isn't quite ready to buy, but the level of interest is there. And they really in the past have had no way to keep that communication open other than calling them every 3 weeks or 2 months and saying, "You ready yet?"
Yes.
And that's where I think marketing can really help the salesperson, not only greasing the skids before, but during that laggard time where somebody is really thinking about it and everything isn't aligned quite yet for them to make that decision. Marketing can really help keep them in tune or in touch with them.
Yeah, and I don't have the statistic top of mind, but the number of leads that end up being just lost opportunities because it wasn't the right time when the salesperson was talking to the prospect, but it wasn't the right time then. They just needed more time. They needed more of something. They needed more marketing, nurturing of some kind, and they might be ready to buy a few weeks from now or a few months from now, and that salesperson never followed up. Or there was nothing in place to keep that prospect engaged, and then poof, it just goes away.
Well, we're unfortunately running out of time, Kitty. So are there a couple of messages you want to leave us with? Maybe some resources that you have for our listeners?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is that this thinking about technology and how technology can be used inside your company or any company is something that hopefully is exciting. That companies see it as, okay, here's an opportunity for us to not just grow this year, but to scale. One of the tools that we make available on our website is called Find My Friction. It's a really quick and easy quiz that company leaders can go in and take, and it helps them identify where the gaps are or where the friction might lie within their sales and marketing efforts. It's an interesting quiz to take, and I encourage multiple people within the company to take it because you'll get differing opinions. But it all comes down to educate yourself on what's going on inside our company, a realistic view of it. And there's no harm in exploring solutions and exploring how these now not even so new, these aren't super new technologies. It's been around for a while and they just keep getting better. So truly, sales and marketing technology is here to stay and only getting better. And it can work for every single business, no matter the size.
Excellent. Thank you. Scott, I assume you'll have a link to that Find My Friction tool.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you go to the website, getinthedoorpodcast.com, you'll be able to come to episode 450, and we'll have a link right to that program, that assessment. Thanks, Kitty.
And then I'll have a resource, one of my 2-minute selling tips, the attitude video, more about what we talked about in our book than about what Kitty talked about, but just another resource. And Kitty, thanks a lot. That was really interesting, and I'm looking forward to learning more about it.
Absolutely. Thank you both.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This segment has been brought to you by the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program, presented by the hosts of the Get in the Door podcast.
Business is heating up, and now is the time to get back on the selling track. While others wait for the market to improve, prospects and opportunities await you now. Perhaps you want to be more productive on your prospecting, or you'd like to increase your closing percentage. Maybe having meetings online is not as comfortable as being in person. Sales reps are telling us they need some honest accountability and skill development to rise above the competition. Whatever your reason, this is the perfect time to engage with an experienced sales coach. That is why the host of Get in the Door podcast, Professor Scott Plum and Bill Hellkamp, have developed the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. For only $495, you can receive personal coaching from the same sales professionals you enjoy on this podcast. It all starts with a discussion to give us your insights into your specific goals, challenges, needs, and motivation. After your 1-hour online session to jumpstart your coaching process, you will receive 5 more half-hour individual coaching sessions to enable you to make improvements over time and create new habits. Most salespeople make their money back with just one sale. Go to getinthedoorpodcast.com to contact Bill or Scott about the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Do you believe you deserve better results? Now is the time to invest in yourself and invest in your future.
Well, we'll wrap up today with our golden nugget and our closing. So our golden nugget today, let's go invent tomorrow instead of worrying about what happened yesterday. And that's by Steve Jobs. And the reason I brought that up, obviously, because we're talking about technology and how we can use technology. And I think that he was great at inventing tomorrow. And sometimes we get stuck in our old ways of doing things.
Exactly. I think you're starting to pick a favorite now. Like I like Play-Doh with all my quotes.
Well,
so very
I like
relevant.
People that are relevant to today.
How can we learn about today if we don't know about yesterday in the past?
Yeah. Scott lives
so
in the
much
past.
Wisdom there.
He's worrying about what happened yesterday.
I'm not worrying. I'm intrigued. I don't want to duplicate the mistakes of the past, but learn from other scholars.
Right. That's what history is about, right? Not duplicating the errors we made. So try to focus on what we can do to invent tomorrow.
Everything we talked about will be at the website, getinthedoorpodcast.com. There's a form there. We'd love to hear your comments, your feedback. If you want to engage with Bill and I, there's different ways for you to reach out to us, but we really like to know more about our listeners. We like to know more about what they want us to talk about and what they want us to present. We bring on experts in the field when we are not experts on a topic like technology. Kitty Hart gave us a great story about how technology is used in the sales arena, and tell us what you want, and Bill and I will work hard to deliver it for you. So thanks for listening.
Next week, we'll start with Chapter 8 of Psychocybernetics, the Success Type Personality. And our topic will be, should you be in sales? Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.